Alright, this video is going to be on the Rapture. I made a video like this before about a year ago, but I just think that we need to touch on it again because I see a lot of hate in the community out there towards post-tribbers. Not so much towards pre-tribbers. It used to be the opposite back in the day. I think these things need to be checked because we're all children of God, correct? And as long as we're preaching the gospel, we might have differences of opinion throughout the Bible. The Bible is a huge book and it can be easily misinterpreted. And I'm going to state that right here, and I'm going to verify it and fact check it, how it could be misinterpreted or why people see a certain thing, right? Like the pre-tribbers versus the post-tribbers. Okay? And I'm going to go over Matthew 24 like how I regularly decode the chapters. Probably not as intense as the old school way of decoding it, but just to point out a couple things and to review it. We're just going to focus mainly on tribulation and rapture, correct? Or at least what looks like to be the rapture. Because you can go down a rabbit hole with Daniel and how it's connected to chapter 24. I did for like a day and a half now. And I'm going to try to just sum it up the best I can for you because those are the aspects I guess we're going to look at. So, like Noah's brought up in this chapter, Daniel's brought up in this chapter. A lot of signs are brought up in this chapter, and we're going to review all this stuff right now. But before we get into that, I'm going to take you down memory lane in Genesis and all the possible rapture parallels that I have found, or, guided by the Holy Spirit, of course. And so I am an open tribber, sorry. An open tribber. What that means is I'm open to the idea of a pre, post, mid, anything, because I'm not going to let anything blind me. And you see in Matthew 24 that Jesus says, which is God, that we should watch out for these things. And we'll get into that verse later on. I don't want to spoil it. But it's not just referring to the rapture, it's referring to these signs and these symbols. The end is nigh. His coming is imminent when we recognize these signs. And that's what we're doing. We're recognizing the signs. That's not just referring to a rapture. I don't even think it's referring to the rapture. I think he's referring to just the second coming, which is, I guess, is referring to the rapture. But, okay, I don't want to confuse any more than that. So we're going to get into the Genesis are the only ones I dug up that we've gone over on this channel in the past year. And I'm sure throughout the entirety of the Bible, there's all kinds of rapture parallels. What I'm saying about this, why is it a big thing? Because a lot of people think that there's a pre-trib rapture. And a lot of people say that it's very obvious to notice. We should be able to expect it because it's in Scripture. And a lot of people say that it's hidden. It's hidden within Scripture. And we could see it in the stories, whether it's Genesis, whether it's Enoch, whether it's Revelation. It doesn't matter. There's always some kind of hidden rapture verse there. And it seems to be the case. But at the same time, could it be misinterpreted? Anything can be. That's the beauty of the Bible. It's alive, and we're meant to see things at certain times. Some people are allowed to see things and some people can't. And that's where it complicates things. And should we be condemning our brothers and sisters because they see something that I don't, or you see something that, whatever. No, we shouldn't be. If we're preaching the gospel and trying our best to abide by Scripture and abide by Jesus and abide by, um, you know, the Word in general, we shouldn't be held condemnable. we're all growing, we're all figuring out new things. And I think that's completely the opposite of what Jesus taught us. Okay? All right, so I'm going to get into Genesis and the possible rapture parallels. Okay, so in Noah, I was going to pull them all up, but I realized that if I do that, it's going to take forever. So I'm going to try to do this video short and sweet, and meaning by that, it'll probably still be an hour long. All right, so Noah 7:17, the ark lifted above the earth. Can that be seen as a possible rapture? A lot of people in the rapture community think so. All right, you have Abraham and Sarah in Genesis 12:17 through 20. Sarah equals the bride, and then at that time there's plagues, like in the story of Moses. Okay, so Sarah, the bride, plagues like Moses, and in the process of freeing the Israelites. So Sarah and Abraham are trying to be free, and there's also a possibility of revelation foreshadowing, but still not very clear, right? And then we also have Abraham again in chapter 14, verse 16. Lot was taken captive, and Abraham brought him back, right? He went to war for Lot and got Lot back. And then there's another story of Lot. Lot is spared by the two angels and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. People utilize that particular verse um, as a rapture verse. But yet, Lot wasn't taken up anywhere. He was just relocated. Okay, you have Isaac and Rebecca, the gathering by the well. Rebecca represents the water bearer, Aquarius, like in the end times. And then the servant that went to go look for Rebecca represents the gathering of the angels, right? The gathering of the bride of Aquarius and Aquarius. So that can be seen as a possible rapture verse, right? Okay, then you also have Jacob fleeing Esau, and they spread out in three different groups, right? You have the children and the handmaids first, then you have Leah, the Gentiles, and you have Rachel, the Jews. A three-part possible rapture, or just grouped together like that. Maybe those ones will be taken first, second, and third. Maybe at different points of time. I don't know. Or maybe we're just looking too deep into these things. But they're there. And that's chapter 33, verses 2 and 3. Okay, but also in Joseph, we also have Joseph watching over the Israelites, right? His brothers and sisters, and providing them food. And that could be seen as a form of rapture when each band went down. They went down 3 times to Egypt. They went down, though, instead of going up. But you figure in the beginning would be the opposite in the end, right? If that makes any sense to you. And then you also have like Enoch as well, right? In that story where Enoch gets taken up by the whirlwind. And we'll get into more of those, but those are just the ones that I found in Genesis. That's just one book. And Genesis is not even that big of a book. And there are rapture parallels, definitely. Um, I'm not going to deny that, and that's the reason why I'm in open rapture. Okay? So now, let's get into Matthew chapter 24. Why this is important is because the apostles asked Jesus, you know, what are the end times going to be looking like? And Jesus explains it to them. And so, do we see a rapture in Jesus' explanation? Yes, we do. We'll get into it. All right. Okay. Matthew chapter 24. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Verse 3. As he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said unto him, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Okay, so have we seen that yet so far? Wars and rumors of wars, all throughout the generations, of course. So we can check that off the list. We're also going to be checking things off the list too to see where we stand in these end times. So bear with me. Okay, verse 7. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. Have we seen famines? Yes, not on a mass scale multitude, but yes, of course. Pestilences, obviously. Earthquakes in diverse places, of course, right? They had that recent 7.2 in, what was it, Turkey, right before the Israel Hamas war, or was it right after? um, there's always crazy earthquakes out there in like Haiti and stuff like that, man. Um, I think we can check this one off the list too. All these are the beginnings of sorrows. Okay, we're not quite into tribulation yet, but they're the beginning of it, like the birth pains. Okay, verse 9. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Are we there yet? Not quite, right? Not all of us are being afflicted, but there's a lot of people in other countries that are. You know, um, some countries they can't, openly celebrate Christianity and stuff like that. So we're getting there, and I know that in this world and this lifetime, I know a lot of people are probably thinking to themselves, like, "Man, I can't even talk about God at work or in my family." That's very true, and I believe that's the beginning of this revelation right here, and it's very true. Um, I've got into, which is not good, being a follower of Christ and stuff, but I've gotten to like you know pretty in depth, heated arguments over just barely talking about God and how God created all things, and people will fight you tooth and nail to hold on to their old indoctrinated beliefs, and it's crazy. And I believe those are the beginnings of that. We can totally see the affliction starting for sure, so we can semi check that. All right, verse 10. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And we can kind of see that coming into place, right? This is an offended culture. You can't even say those old school jokes like you used to say, amongst your friends or in the workplace or whatever. People will sue you. They get offended. They get offended if you talk about God. They get offended for everything. Um, that one, for you can definitely check that one off the list when, from my point of view. But yeah, that one's another one. It's a half checked box for sure. And many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. We've had false prophets. We've heard about them. We've seen those crazy cults out there that make everybody drink the punch and they all die. Um, has there been many? I would say not yet. And Jesus brings up this false prophets and people to be Christ twice. You know, um, false Christ and false prophets. So he's really adamant on that being confirmed before the sign of his coming, right? So we'll get to that second notation of that. Verse 12, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. That one, definitely, you can check it. Verse 13, but he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. So, right here, we have a verification of enduring to the end. If we're being raptured out of here, then why do we have to endure to the end? So, what I'm saying is, this is a point for the other side, roughly. And for us to condemn our brothers and sisters, post tribbers, mid tribbers, or pre tribbers, well, there's definitely scripture to support it. Verse 13 definitely supports it. Someone could read this, especially early in the faith, or maybe even late in the faith, but someone can definitely get this and be like, it says that we have to endure to the end. Endure to the end. So you're going to sit there and condemn somebody because they're enduring, because they have that mindset to endure when verse 13 tells them to endure? Not just verse 13. There are more verses as we tread upon this lightly, um, that will verify verse 13, or at least to uphold it. Okay, verse 14. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Okay, now we got the first sign of the end coming, right? So the gospel, not just the Bible, but the gospel. The gospel is, the blood of Christ. The resurrection is the gospel. In all the world, I would say with the internet and everything, and most places in the world are civilized, even in the places that you think that are not. They have internet, or they have phones, or they have. I believe there's very few places, very, 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 very few places that haven't heard the gospel or haven't heard Jesus. I think this one is already fulfilled, but I could be wrong. Um, or we're right at the cusp of almost every, indigenous tribesman out there hearing the gospel. But it doesn't even say like every person. It just says, unto all nations. And I think all nations have heard the gospel, right? Okay, verse 15. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Okay, so this is the rabbit hole I was talking about. Okay, so we get into Daniel. Let's figure out what the abomination of desolation is. Prior to this study, to my understanding, I thought that this didn't take place yet, or at least um, I never really thought about it. Like, did this happen before or anything like that? Even though I've heard Daniel, I've read it plenty of times, but I read it. I didn't study it the way I should have. And yeah, the abomination of desolation has already happened on a couple occasions. So I believe what this verse is referring to is like, or we can see these things happen again. And I'll show you. Let's go down I'll try to make this simple. Okay, so Daniel 10, 11, and 6 are referring to end times. And a lot of people out there believe that they're talking about the very end. Um, but in Daniel 10, 11, and 12, which are the last three remaining chapters of Daniel, it's referring to, man, remember, Daniel was a prophet about the end of those times. And those things did fulfill. It was about somebody standing, it was about the abomination of desolation. You see a foreshadowing of the end in it too, and I'll get into that in a minute. So instead of reading all three of these chapters, which are pretty, Daniel 12 is pretty long, or not 12, Daniel 11. Okay, so um, It when you read it, it sounds like the end. Maybe I should read Daniel 11. Oh, let's go. Let's read Daniel 11:31. And the arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. Let me give you a little foreground or background of Daniel, what's going on right now. In Daniel 10, 11, and 12. So Daniel 10, God appears to him and tells him this prophetic thing that's going to happen in the future. You get these four kings that are scrimmaging all over there in the Israel, Iran, Iraq area over there. Um, and then you have Daniel 12, and it talks about the last 3.5 years of this scrimmage, and one of these kings will will fulfill this prophecy of standing in the holy place, the abomination that make it desolate. And what that really means is I found an article that simplifies this instead of going through all this stuff. So I'll do that. I'll just read the article, and it'll give you a foreground or an understanding of what's going on. Okay. Okay. The abomination of desolation, that sounds like a Spider-Man villain, but it will be very real and far more serious. Mentioned in Daniel 9, the Old Testament prophet alludes to a ruler who will wreak havoc on Israel and the ruler who will wreak havoc on Christians in the end times. Not over with. Daniel 9:27, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1, 7. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. And at the end, the temple will set up the abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. But which is it? If the abomination of desolation set up by said ruler has already happened, then what is with this future business? We must remember that the Bible often hints at things to come. Just as there are many antichrists, people pretending to be Christ or claiming to be Christ-like authority, before the Antichrist steps on the stage, so goes the same way with the abomination of desolation. This article will explore it in its past and in its future. Okay, see, this is what I was trying to say. Is that um, I'll come back to this in a second. So I googled all this stuff and researched it. Um, the abomination of desolation verse explained, and it talks about Antiochus and his rulership and how he set up his shrine over there on the Temple Mount, and technically that was the abomination of desolation. But in Daniel, it does say at the end, and people believe that there's a foreshadowing to come, meaning that Daniel is a foreshadowing of the end times. So we should be able to see the abomination of desolation in Revelation, and that's why it's mentioned. And when you read Daniel, this is the mind blowing part about it, is that in Daniel 11 and Daniel 12, Daniel 11 has these four kings, right? These three from Persia and this one from Grecia. And Grecia could be seen as the Roman Empire, and America even can be seen as a transformation of the Roman Empire. And end times. Does it directly correspond? These four kings directly correspond to the four horsemen and their location? No, it's just a foreshadowing of it. So when you read Daniel 11, it's actually the beginning of tribulation with the four horsemen. And then when you read Daniel 12, it's the last 3.5 years, which is really cool because it even brings it up in Daniel pertaining to those times. Antiochus didn't even happen yet. Daniel was prophesying these things to come. But yet, we know by studying scripture, things happen over and over and over. And that's what these people are alluding to, is the fact that that Daniel is going to be happening again. The fact that it's brought up in end times and Revelation, meaning why would it bring up something that already done happened, but it didn't happen in Daniel's time yet. Daniel was prophesying this. Why would they bring it up again? Because it's going to happen again. That's what the Bible's trying to tell you. That's what these people are going to try to tell you. And I see it. I saw it when I was reading chapter 11 and 12. I mean, I read them, the whole book, but I was like, this sounds like the end times. This sounds like, the four horsemen, like a foreshadowing of it, the parallel of it. And then the other in verse 12, I mean, chapter 12 sounds the last 3.5 years, the Great Tribulation. So you have the tribulation, chapter 11, and then chapter 12, the Great Tribulation, foreshadowing. Okay, we're going to keep on going. So, what does the Bible say about the abomination of desolation? And that's the whole thing why we're here. And I can keep on going about Daniel and the parallels and all that stuff, or even just the in-depth stuff. Hopefully this particular article will give it justice. Then again, I'm not an expert in Daniel yet. um, it was just a crash course on Daniel, so forgive me if I get things wrong or if I'm saying things wrong. um, to later as we study more. I think I'm going to do an in-depth study on Daniel soon, and also another one on Revelation. So based on the rapture and end times study on it. All right. Before exploring this typology, we do have to develop an understanding of the nature of this thing. As noted in the passage above, Daniel 9 describes a terrible ruler who will rule over God's people. This alludes to the Antichrist and many Antichrists who came before him. He will set up an abomination, hence the name that's in the temple of God, an unclean sacrifice that goes against the laws found in the Pentateuch. These big words, man. He will also attempt to thwart the laws of God. This means ending the sacrifices in the temple, changing the religious calendar, etc. And we see that already. See these things that can be seen as like unclean and antichrist, like the calendar. You know, we have Passover coming up, and everybody's celebrating Easter, and we know Easter has pagan roots, and that could be seen as very antichrist like. Anyway, a few other passages in the Bible talk about antichrists and the abominations they create. Changing the calendar is an abomination. His armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple's fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifices. And they will set up abomination that causes desolation. Talks about how the Antichrist will do away with the sacrifices the Israelites participated in. Remember that God set up the sacrificial system to show the people their need for salvation. According to Daniel 12:11, the abomination of desolation lasts 1,290 days, or roughly 3.5 years. From the time the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that caused desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. In Matthew 24:15, Jesus talks about abomination of desolation occurring in the future. It happened in the past, and it will reappear in the end times. In this gospel, the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations. Then the end will come. So we've just gone over. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. That's about all the Bible lets on about the abomination of desolation. We know that the abomination of desolation stands against everything God stands for. And when the Antichrist steps on the scene, he will create pseudo everything. We have an unholy trinity, their false religions, and their mark, as opposed to the mark placed on believers in Revelation, the mark of God. So it makes sense that even the sacrificial system would get edged out by something unholy. Now that we've uncovered the Bible verses mentioned about the abomination, let's explore the first one to defile the temple of Israel. Okay, what was the abomination of desolation in the past? Enter Antiochus Epiphanes IV, one of the meanest rulers in Earth's history. You may not have heard of him. You may not have heard of Maccabees, who did everything they could to supplant what he did, and they succeeded. After Alexander the Great swept onto the world stage, much of the world was Hellenized. Like, that's why we say hello, or how's your health? Changed to the follow Greek culture, Hellenization had many consequences, including a Hellenized progressive group in Jesus' time known as the Sadducees. Antiochus Epiphanes IV sought to do the same to Israel. He stopped the sacrifices in Jerusalem's temple. Then he entered the temple, set up a statue of Zeus, the abomination of desolation, and sacrificed a pig in its sanctuary. See, that sounds more like it, right? More like an abomination than anything. For those unfamiliar with kosher laws, Antiochus essentially pointed his middle finger at the Jewish religion. Jews could not eat pigs. We even see Peter object to this after he's saved and no longer under the law. Wow. This act would defile the temple in every sense of the word. It sparked Maccabees' rebellion to defeat Hellenization of their culture. Their revolt did manage to reclaim Israel's culture for a time. Maccabees ruled Israel as a free nation for several generations until the Romans arrived. So, the first abomination of desolation is a historical event. This begs the question of whether Daniel just referred to this abomination or hinted at one to come. Our best lead for the latter comes through Matthew 24, verse above. What is the abomination of desolation in times? As described before, there could be many types and shadows in scriptures. We see Christ as a new Adam, as described in the New Testament. Antichrist, like Nero, exists long before the final boss battle will occur on earth. There's no reason not to believe that another abomination of desolation could exist in the end times. Matthew 24 more alludes to that. Okay, then that's where we're at. And just by studying Genesis, we know that these things repeat. We've identified so many parallels. And I know Jesus in his infinite wisdom was definitely alluding to that, but I could be wrong. That's what I'm talking about too. Is also just look at how this could get misinterpreted. Some people can be like, well, it already happened. Then you have other people that it didn't happen yet, or it's going to happen again, or these things repeat. Does that mean we call their theology, does that mean we condemn it? We call it evil and blasphemous? No. It's misinterpretations. And we're trying to all figure this out together. That's the whole premise of this video. And this is a good example of that. And this is just one article. I read a couple articles and they say the exact same things pretty dang much. So, everyone's kind of conflicted if it's going to happen again or this thing was already fulfilled. Okay. Isn't it kind of crazy too? Look at this. Check this out. So, and okay, before I get into that, um, this already happened a second time with the Romans. The exact same thing. I believe they set up shrines, like Jupiter shrines and stuff like that. The exact same thing in the temple. So this thing just not only happened once, it happened twice. And oh no, technically three times because now look at who's on the Temple Mount. They have uh, the um, the mosque up there, and you know the Muslims are in charge of that. So you see this thing just repeating over and over and over. At some point, Jesus is going to come back and reclaim everything that's his. But check this out. Many people already know, like Antiochus, right? It sounds like Antichrist. That cannot be coincidental. So this is a definite foreshadowing. Epiphanes the fourth, right? I'm sure this probably happened in the 4,000th year, possibly. Bet. Could be wrong. But still, it's still Antichrist Epiphanes the fourth. Sounds like, and then it's connected to the abomination of desolation. Um, and you can see how this can easily translate. Since we're no longer under law, we're under grace. Could that mean a possible more spiritual aspect of it? Jesus declared the body to be the temple, right? Um, could something in our temple that can possibly change us be called the abomination of desolation? Could the changing of time be, us celebrating Easter's and you know our secular holidays? Could that be a type of abomination of desolation? Yeah. Could us taking relying on our governments for our aid and our healing and our money and our hope and our relying on man, could that be an abomination? Possibly. Could this thing have transformed to something else? Possibly. Or could we be expecting the exact same thing? I think that's probably the first and foremost thing to be looking for, because it happened 3 times in the temple. Okay, so what is the abomination of desolation? It's a great sin. It's a covenant violation. It's idolatry, and it's usually associated to the temple. Is that the physical temple or the spiritual temple? And we are under the grace period, which represents spirituality, and the law represents physicality. Um, could it transform in end times because we are under spirituality? We're under grace. Who knows? Um, all I know is we got to keep our eyes on Jerusalem, Israel, these places, the Temple Mount, and also our inner temple. Okay, so we're going to keep on going. All right, verse 16. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. Woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. Pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. And it seems like there would be some kind of persecution specifically on Sabbath days. Um, and that kind of alludes to the abomination, right? Some kind of possible takeover and them policing the Sabbath days or something like that. Verse 21. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Okay, so we still don't have a rapture verse or anything that's alluding to the rapture verse. And right now on verse 21, the great tribulation is identified. And people say, oh no, there's two different tribulations. Well, if there is, then all the previous stuff is the tribulation. And verse 21 identifies as great tribulation. And yet we have no absolute verification of a rapture yet. But yet we're going through great tribulation. Okay? Okay, one could say that this chapter, which I've heard it a million times, that they're talking to the Jews, not the Gentiles. If that were so, then why would people be persecuted for his name's sake? Because the Jews don't believe until the end of the tribulation. So therefore, he's got to be talking to the Jews and Gentiles. God in his infinite wisdom would know that Gentiles years later would be confused with this and like, what are they talking to us or talking to them? Jesus clearly said it, for my name's sake. The Jews I know over there in Israel, the majority of them, they don't believe in Jesus. They won't believe until the end. All these things have to come to pass. Then they will believe. Okay? And let's see. I'll go back to that verse. For my name's sake. All right. We'll keep on going. We'll revisit that verse in a second. I don't want to lose train of thought here. Okay. Verse 22. And except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh be saved. For the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Okay, and so we know that this is circulating, and we all know it ourselves, that there is something definitely going on with the day-night cycle, with time speeding up, um, with the sun and the moon getting brighter. It's for sure. It's an absolute assurity, 100%. I remember not too long ago, like a decade ago, that if I didn't get sleep that day and had to go to work, I felt like I was there for long, so long. Or if I was like hungover, this is back in the old days. I don't drink. It's been a long time. Just using this as an example. Or if I was sick, I felt like I was at work for so long. Like this is never gonna end. Like I'm gonna have to quit my job and just walk out. It's so bad. But nowadays, if I don't sleep, and I believe that God knows there's this spiritual battle going on. We're all being, we're all fighting these demons or these negative forces that come at us, right? Especially when we seek the Lord's counsel. This world doesn't want you to turn to God, and it'll stop at nothing, you know, to get you back, right? And nowadays, if I go to work sick or tired or something like that, the day goes by so quick. Like I can handle it. And it always reminds me of this verse. Except those days should be shortened, there shall no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Um, it makes these spiritual battles or these sick days or these tired days manageable or palatable. Otherwise, and they're frequent nowadays too. It's not just with me. I see with other people. You know, But I just feel like the days go by so quick before I know it's time to go. And I've heard other channels talk about the same thing. And also too, I'm always having to readjust my time in my car, right? And it's a trip. It's something that I've been personally dwelling on for years, and I've been thinking about it to myself for years, and I hear other people talking about it, and I don't feel so crazy about talking about it now. But I think we all kind of notice it, and we all kind of know exactly why and what it is, and I think it does allude to this chapter 22. Are we that far into it? No, but I believe that we're seeing the beginnings of the changes of time, and I think it'll be way more noticeable later on when things start getting way harder, physically and spiritually, or spiritually and physically. You know, when we start seeing these wars manifest on the spiritual level, I mean on the physical level, I believe that the spiritual war is in full effect, 100%. And maybe I'll do videos on that. That nobody's talking about this, but we're all struggling with it. Um, the most people are talking about are Christians. Every now and then you'll hear a Christian bout with it, or talk about, like, oh, I feel like I was spiritually attacked last night and I couldn't sleep and I tossed and turned, or these bad things happened in my life, blah blah blah. I feel like I'm being spiritually attacked, because you are. These things are real. There is a real tangible spiritual war going on right now, and my last video I kind of get into that I won't get into it now. Got to stay on course here. Okay, verse 23. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. Okay, so we got a second verse of, you know, right here. Here we go. Verse 24. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, so much that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Wow. Have we seen that yet? No. But I'm sure that's coming over the horizon very soon. Um, we've seen false Christs, we've seen false prophets, but doing great wonders and great signs, eh, not really. But you know it's coming for sure. Verse 25, behold, I've told you before. Verse 26, wherefore if they shall say unto you, behold, he is in the desert, go not forth, behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. And the secret chambers kind of remind me of like the pyramids or something like that, and then you have that iPad Goat 3 that nobody ever pays any mind to, but it's loaded with symbolism as well. Um, he's in the secret chambers, and in those secret chambers, um, there are these orbs that lift out the Ark of the Covenant. And you shouldn't believe it, because we know by studying Revelation the Ark of the Covenant is seen in heaven, not here on earth anymore, because we are under grace. Anyway, verse 27. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For whosoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Wow. Immediately after the tribulation of those days. Okay. So after the tribulation, that's where we're at right now. And great tribulation, is that still continuing to go? And then now regular tribulation is ended? Either way, some form of tribulation has already started. So that kind of blows the whole pre-trib rapture out the water. These are Jesus's words. So you can't get mad at post-tribbers for this literal translation, or this literal, uh, edification. I want to say edification. These literal verses that are talking about tribulation and what happens before and after. These aren't figurative. These aren't parallels. This is Jesus explaining exactly what's happening in those days, or these days to come. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. Okay, that's after tribulation. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in the heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Have we entered the rapture yet? I haven't seen any rapture verses yet. And this should correspond with what's going on in Revelation, correct? All right. He shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet. Okay, now it's sounding a lot like Revelation with the trumpets. He shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So you got the four winds, like the four angels holding the four winds, remember, in Revelation? Okay. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender, he putteth forth leaves. Ye know that summer is nigh. Okay, so I'll prove to you that there are Revelation parallels here. So in Revelation 6:13, and the stars of heaven fell unto earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. So Jesus is referring to the end times. And he's definitely lining it up with Revelation. Um, for the most part. Okay, so here we go. Verse 33. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving into marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark. Okay, so when people read this chapter, they say that, okay, things were normal, right? Well, giving into marriage is not normal, right? Eating and drinking, that could be like excessively, right? That not necessarily mean a normal thing, right? So we already went into Daniel, we might as well go into Noah, correct? All right. Noah's not that long of a chapter. Get a for understand of what was going on in the times of Noah. And it came to pass, men began to multiply on the face of the earth. The daughters were born unto them. That the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives, of all which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. And there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And I believe that's exactly what Jesus was referring to more than anything, was Genesis 6:5. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and creepy thing, and fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Okay? I think we have an understanding of what was going on. Um, let's go to 6:13. God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Okay? So that doesn't seem all was merry and normal. I think our understanding of things, it gets lost in interpretation. We have to read the whole story, all the content, get the right context right when we discern things, and we can see that things weren't normal. Things were building up to a head, just like right now, right? It sounds just like right now. There might not be giants in the way that we understand Genesis, and then again, that could be lost in translation as well. Um, it could be figurative, like giant men, right? I know there's other sections where, we're as grasshoppers to them. Even that could be figurative. But what I'm saying is, and nowadays, there might not be giants, but there are giant men out there. There are so-called supermen out there that, have the money and the power and all that stuff. Um, but everything else checks out. We see violence over and over and over. We see that men's heart is evil continually. Um, these things check off, man. They definitely, the box is definitely checked for sure. All right. Verse 39. And knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. And I think he's also referring to the fact that they just didn't know. Nobody knew besides a selected few. Right? Verse 40. Then shall two be in the field, then one shall be taken and the other left. Okay, now we have arrived to what sounds like a rapture, correct? I even heard pre-tribbers allude this to the rapture or to confirm it. This is the rapture, and we clearly see that in this very verse, and not this very verse, this very chapter, we see Jesus talking to not just the Jews, but the Gentiles. We clearly see that this rapture-esque type thing going on right now is after the tribulation. Okay, verse 41. Two men shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord come. Know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would have not suffered his house to be broken up. Okay, so a lot of people take this as watching for the rapture, but it's not just that. It's not just watching out for the rapture, which we should be doing, but it's watching for these signs of the tribulation, these signs of great tribulation. It's knowing when Jesus is coming back. That's what we should be watching out for the signs, the times, and the seasons, and for the Son of Man to return and the rapture. It's all the above. It's not just, okay, we should be watching out for the rapture. And what I'm saying is, if we're just rapture blind, we got our rapture blinders on, we're going to miss all these other signs that Jesus was talking about. We're not going to examine these things. And if we know that now by reading Matthew 24, all these signs that could be happening in Revelation, which get way more into depth of what's going on, we're going to miss it because we're waiting for the rapture that seemingly is happening after the tribulation for the Jews and Gentiles or whoever. Because I know people will be like, this is just for the Jews, just for the Jews. It can't be just for the Jews because these people will be hated for his name's sake. That's alluding to Gentiles. And Jesus is God. You think he's not going to, calculate that? I think he would have specified this, just like he specified before in previous verses that, he has other sheep and other sheepfolds, right? Alluding to the Gentiles. I think he would have made it clear. God knows all things. Therefore, in his infinite wisdom, he would have known that people would have been confused. Is it Jews or Gentiles? To me, it's very clear. He didn't specify because he knows the people who believe in Jesus are Gentiles, the majority of them at that time, you know. I don't know. To me, it's clear as day. But people are going to say, "Oh, this is just for the Jews. It's for the Jews." Okay, hold on. We're going to finish this, and then we're going to backtrack that verse. All right. Okay. I'll go back to verse 43. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would have not suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore, be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord had made ruler over his household to give them meat in due season? Meat, like Scripture, like the Word, not, not just looking for the rapture, but meat, teaching them. Blessed is that servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken, the Lord of that servant shall come in the day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. And there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Okay, so we should be watching for all things, not just the rapture. Um, we should be watching for the signs in the heavens, the sign of the Son of Man. We should be watching for the return of Christ. We should be watching for uh, all these things that Jesus told us to watch. Wars, wars, rumors of wars, people pretending to be Christ. All these things we should be watching out for because we know the time is close. Okay? Okay, so verse 9. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And this was stated before the tribulation verses were stated and before the rapture was stated. So therefore, this is the very beginning of these sorrows. So he clearly can't be talking to the Jews because the Jews are not believers yet in the beginning. He's talking to us, Gentiles. Not solely, but partially for sure. All right? Because I know a lot of people will weigh in on the whole, this is for the Jews, man. It's for us. And then Paul even said there's no difference between Jew and Gentile. All right. So this video wasn't to attack pre-tribbers or to justify post-tribbers. It was just to bring peace between the two, because there's a reason why people are post-tribbers. Because of Matthew 24, you know. Could we be getting things misunderstood? Could it be for the Jews? It could be. I'm not going to sign off and say anything because the word is so multi-layered. It's so deep and rich. It's alive, and it sometimes points of views even change over time. All I know is that my Lord Jesus Christ died for my sins and shed his blood, and he resurrected, and I believe that, and that's the importance here. Is this believing this point of view going to damn you to hell? No, it's not. It's only going to damn you to hell if you're not watching. No, when you just don't believe, that's what damns you to hell. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much all I have on this. It's just We got to be mindful from people's point of view or their level of theology. Um, Also, most scripture comes down through us to us from somebody else, and you can't damn that individual because they have a teacher with a different point of view or somebody, based on less understanding. And we have to be mindful of these things. Before we condemn people, we should show them the truth. And we should be patient with each other. And no matter what, we should love each other, just like Jesus said. And that pretty much wraps it up, this chapter. Decode. Um, Passover's coming up soon. So you either have a choice to worship the rabbit or worship the rabbi. So make sure to observe Passover. Um, if you're a new believer, try to put it into practice. It's fun. It's you know, uh, unleavened bread. It's delicious. It's good. It's fun to make. You feel like a closer kinship to God. You won't be condemned if you don't do these things. But I believe we're at perilous times, and we should show our allegiance to the world. We should be good stewards of God. That we're all followers of God, and that's including God's holy feast days instead of celebrating blasphemous pagan secular holidays. It's your choice. Um, Jesus did observe these things. He didn't come to do away with the law, but to fulfill it. Um, Paul says that we won't be condemned by it, but at the same time, um, you know, you have a choice. I like to practice it, put it into practice. I like to observe it the best I can. I'm not a slave to it at the same time. I'll do a video on it, on Passover and the practice of it before Passover comes, and maybe some ingredients and how to make flatbread and stuff like that, unleavened bread. Alrighty, and that's pretty much it. It's late for me right now. It's already like in the AM over here. uh, so I did the best I could for y'all. Hopefully you liked it. Thank you for watching.